We have collected questions submitted by students on our online survey, forum, and social media over the last 6 months. If you have any questions that you would like to be addressed, feel free to submit it via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag UCDPHSA14. And popular questions will be integrated into our live feed and into our panels. For this reason, we will not be taking questions directly from the audience. Today, we're very excited to have 4 distinguished panelists from several prestigious graduate institutions from across the country. To begin the panel, going down the line, starting with Dr. O'Riordan, we'll have each distinguished panelist to introduce themselves, their title, their institution, in a short 1-minute introduction.
Well, thanks very much, Tina, for the invitation. My name is Mary O'Riordan, and I got my Ph.D. from the University of California, San Francisco. And I'm now an associate professor and the director of graduate studies in the Department of Micro and Immunology at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So I'm here representing a very large biomedical sciences program called the Program in Biological Sciences, which has 14 different programs that together offer about 500 faculty that are available to incoming students to this program. So it's a really great way to come and learn about analytical thinking, about science, and all of the different ways that you can use science training in your future career.
Good morning. My name is Jabbar Bennett, and I serve as Associate Dean at the Graduate School and Associate Dean for Diversity in the Division of Biology and Medicine at Brown University. At Brown, we have 52 PhD programs, several biomed specific that I hope to share information about today. But we also have other programs within STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math related. And I'm happy to answer any questions regarding those as well.
Good morning. I'm Nicquet Blake. I'm from the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. I'm the Associate Dean of the Graduate School, handle admissions and recruitment for the graduate school. We have about 17 PhD and master's programs that we offer. We are actually the center of an academic health center. So we have a medical school, dental school, nursing school, health professions, and the graduate school. I'm representing the graduate school today. I'll be happy to talk to you ad nauseum about anything you want to know about the graduate school. We have 3 flagship programs that we talk about, our translational science PhD, our interdisciplinary program, and then our radiological sciences. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Steve Lee. I'm here at UC Davis, so I didn't have to travel far for this conference, fortunately. So I'm here as what they call a graduate diversity officer for the STEM disciplines. So that means I help graduate students come here to UC Davis for a wide variety of STEM disciplines. Here at UC Davis, we've got over 90 graduate programs. About 60 of them are sort of in the STEM disciplines. And before coming here to UC Davis, I'm relatively new, so I just got here about a year ago. So I was at Northwestern University for about 6 years, doing some similar work with graduate students in bioscience graduate programs. So.
Okay, so now after the speakers have introduced themselves, we'll be going straight to questions. I'll cover topics, various topics about research experience and other things that admissions looks at. So our first question is it necessary to have research experience before applying? And if so, what is the recommended amount of time? And starting with Dr. O'Riordan.
Great, that's a really good question. So because research is a huge focus of our institution, we're in the top 10 in NIH research grants. We do really heavily weight research experience in our application process. And although we don't have a specific amount of time that we use as a cutoff, really what we're looking for is for people to have had meaningful research experiences. In other words, we want you as students to go into the lab, to learn something about what research is like that's very different than when you take your lab classes. So we want you to be able to sort of have a taste of independent research that gives you a sense of what to expect when you come to graduate school.
Yes.
And Dr. Bennett, would you like to add something to that?
The only things I'll add and agree is that having some research experience is good, whether you get that during the year and or in the summer, it's really good. I think getting research experience off-site, off your campus, like during the summers, is also really good to show that you have a diversity of training in a different type of environment, and hopefully you've learned something new to sort of supplement what you've gotten on campus. But again, having a couple of years of research experience prior to applying to a bioscience and biomedical science PhD program is a really, really good idea.
Ditto.
And Dr. Blake?
Ditto. You really will not get into grad school without research, period.
Okay, so we actually have one of our panelists coming in. Two more, actually.
So they move down.
And so, yeah, move down again. Or here, let me just move.
Okay.
Sorry, we are late.
So now we have all 6 of our speakers present. We have, would you guys like to introduce yourselves, starting with Dr. Jones? Your institution and your research, your institution.
Thank you. My name is Harlan Jones. I'm from the University of North Texas Health Science Center in Fort Worth. It's about 35 miles west of Dallas. We represent the graduate school, University of North Texas Health Science Center, through the Center for Diversity and International Programs. Historically, I've been a part of the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at the Health Science Center as Director of Recruitment, as well as Assistant Dean in Recruitment and Outreach. We represent a broad spectrum of disciplines within the biomedical sciences, and we're glad to be here to represent our institution.
So I'm J.K. Vishwanatha. I'm also from the same University of North Texas Health Science Center. I was Dean of the Graduate School until recently, and both of us, Dr. Jones and I, are now starting a new Center for Diversity and International Programs. As part of that, like Dr. Jones mentioned, we are interested in recruitment of students to not only our medical school, but also School of Health Professions, Public Health School. And also we have a number of programs in the graduate school to prepare undergraduate students to get into medical profession. So we'll be happy to talk about any of those programs. Thank you.
Okay. So our second question here is, are there any misconceptions about the application process that you feel the need to be clarified? And let's have our second question go to Dr. Joe.
I think one of the issues we hear quite often in terms of the application process is really the credentials, the requirements that the admissions committee holds true in terms of acceptance or not acceptance into any particular program. And what we really try to do is, there really isn't one hard line that we can point to. Of course, criteria such as GRE standardization scores and GPA are important, but we look more of the total application, and we encourage our admissions committee to really take a look at the whole individual application, from the experience one may have in terms of outreach activities all the way to the intent of pursuing of a biomedical or medical science degree, and that happens to do with what type of programs they were involved in, whether it be research internships or clinical internships and so forth. So I think that's one of the questions that, you know, some students coming to apply to our institution, our different programs, really have trouble with. You know, how do they meet the criteria to enter our programs at our institution?
And Dr. Lee, did you want to add anything to that?
So I don't know if you're going to be talking about like things like personal statements later.
No, we won't be, but
Okay.
you can talk a little about it.
Okay, so one thing that I'll mention is that in terms of applications, one of the things that perhaps not is quite a misperception, but I find a lot of students struggling with what's often referred to as the personal statement, where you have to write an essay about a page or a page and a half long. And in terms of a lot of instructions, I've seen it's often very vague. Students, I have to admit, that are lost because the instructions are vague. But it's often just a question about trying to help the admissions committee understand yourself and help you, give you an opportunity to explain a little bit about your personal and professional interests. But given that personal statement, I would just strongly encourage folks when they're writing that, start off with your strengths. A lot of times students start telling them about a story about how they got interested in science and research and so forth, which is good, but you sort of force the reader to go through a long sort of discussion about yourself before talking about your actual strengths. And so I would strongly encourage you to think about, as you write your personal statements, to start off with your strengths, because keep in mind that admissions people are usually going to read dozens of these applications, so they're not going to be able to read every single word of your essay. But in terms of your personal statement, start off with your strengths, maybe even have a bullet list. So this is my key strengths, and then elaborate upon it for the rest of your personal statement. So that's one area which I think a lot of students struggle with, and understandably so, because often the instructions are kind of vague. So.
Yeah, can I add to that? So I completely agree that this is not well explained, and I agree with everything that Dr. Lee said. So I want to add, I mean, we read hundreds of applications just for my departmental program. And so not only do you, I think, want to, really outline your strengths, but it's really a great place to address anything that is not obvious from your CV. Strengths, if there's a particular gap in time where you took some time off from school. So it's really, again, not necessarily sort of your whole life history, but really something that says, why am I a really great candidate for your program? And to follow up on that, there's also usually a research statement. And I think some people do this very well, but really what we're looking for here is, can you sort of, succinctly and, in a really sort of nice, clear way describe the research that you've been doing in your experience? And so again, it's not necessarily like you have to fill up that page, but to really state, your research goals, your research experience. And so I think that that's a really useful thing to focus some time on, because it's very helpful to us.
And Dr. Blake and Dr. Bennett, do you guys have any other ideas or suggestions?
I would add two things. One, there's the misconception that you don't need to work really hard on your personal statement. It's your personal statement defines who you are. And if you trivialize it, then when I'm looking at it, I'll know that. And how will I treat your application? Okay, so that's one. And the second thing is, excuse me, it's important to remember that for most of these programs, I don't know about every program that's sitting here, but for most of these programs, someone on that admissions committee is going to have to sell you to a broader committee. You have got to give the reader ammunition in your personal statement.
Yes, I'll just add again, sort of underscore the importance of the personal statement, because it's really one of the main components of your application that will set you apart from everyone else. Everyone who applies to our programs, which are all top programs that are well funded, will have good grades, good GREs, good research experience, and so forth, but the personal statement is your opportunity to tell us why you're different and why we should consider you in our program. The other thing I will say is that please, please, please do not send the same personal statement to every school that you apply to. Be careful about including a school's name as well, because oftentimes you will send Brown's application to Michigan, and when we read that, it just gives us a reason not to finish looking at your application, because again, every program is looking at hundreds of these, so be very careful about that as well.
So one, I don't know whether it's a misconception, but at least something that you should be very careful is your personal statement should be pretty much consistent with the rest of your records. If you say in your personal statement that I have extensive volunteer experience, and then I go and look at your application and all you have done is 3 hours on a weekend, it's not consistent. So make sure that you don't make up something in your personal statement that is not in your transcript or other things. Any reviewer who goes through will easily make that up, and also the interviewer will have the same problem. Second thing to avoid is proofreading errors. More often than not, what I have seen is the reader will get distracted from your essay. They start circling the next grammatical error that you have, rather than reading through your, so basically you lost them from the beginning. So make sure that you proofread it, have someone else read it to make sure that there is no grammatical or other errors in your personal statement. Very, very important. So you don't want to lose your reader right in the beginning.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Vishwanatha. Now, our next question is, what are the main areas that admissions look at when selecting a candidate for PhD? And this could go to Dr. O'Riordan.
I think we sort of hit this before, which is that we don't have any hard and fast cutoffs. Of course, it helps when you've gotten great grades in your science classes, but really we're looking for very meaningful research experiences, meaning that and actually I want to emphasize that this is not just because we're an admissions committee and we're saying, oh, you have to have X years, but what it means is you have to really let us know that you know what research is about and then you like it even though it's hard, takes a lot of work. And so, that's part of why we're looking for that very extensive research experience.
And Dr. Bennett? No?
No, nothing
Nothing?
significant to add.
Do any of the panelists have any suggestions?
If you say that you have done some research, make sure you know what you have done. Okay, if you say in undergraduate I had done something, when you go for an interview, the person who is interviewing you may ask you, what did you, tell me something about that research. If you have no clue about it, that's a pretty bad thing. So if you say that you have done research, before your interview, make sure that you've read up on it and you know something more about it so that you can explain meaningfully. For those of you who are doing dual degree applications, obviously you need to do a lot more work and you need to know more about it. But that's a message that I want to send you, which is that if you've done something, know about it.
If I may add, another, I think, important aspect to the application in terms of research is understand the institution and what research they are doing and what particular, professor or researcher clinician is actually doing. And so many times we'll see the names come across that I'm interested in Dr. So-and-so's area of this, and yet when they get to the interview, they have no clue. You may have no clue what they're doing. And, it's about being really keen on that the reviewers will identify these things and bring them back to light if you happen to be in an interview. So your passion about your wanting to be a researcher not only extends into the potential program or discipline you want to go into, the area, but also identifying that area with the institution that you're applying to all the way down to the professors that are there in the labs. So I think that's important.
Okay, and then the next question talks about careers outside of academia. So here it goes. What kind of resources or programs or opportunities does your school offer for students who are interested in pursuing a career outside of academia? And starting with Dr. Lee.
So just helping students think about after the PhD, perhaps?
Yeah, after the PhD and how they can branch out.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities and things and options to think about after the PhD. There's a really wonderful infographic that you might be able to search online. It's called something like, what can I do after a biology PhD? And so if you just Google that, I think the American Society of Cell Biology put together something like this. So it's a really wonderful infographic. You can see how many PhDs that, students actually start each year and what their different routes are in terms of going for faculty, industry, government positions and things like that. It's helpful to think about that. So, but there's tons of things that you could do after your PhD, whether it is obviously faculty positions, tenure track or non-tenure track. There's industry positions. You can go into government research organizations, and it's kind of interesting though. I've actually been talking with quite a few people who are actually in my type of role, where they get a PhD, but they're actually now shifting directions into professional development. And so a lot of what I do is what I would consider professional development, helping grad students to gain professional soft skills, whether it's communication, mentoring, relationship, and things like that. It's quite an interesting realm, and so this is slightly different, but because there's so many students now who, after they get their PhD, because there's so many options out there, they're helping grad students think about these professional skills. And so I see a lot of consultants and people who are actually starting their own business and so forth. So it's kind of an interesting little pocket of people doing this type of work. But there's tons of things that you can do after your PhD. So.
And Dr. Blake, would you like to mention any specific opportunities that your school offers?
Sure. The Health Science Center, the graduate school at the Health Science Center just launched a career development office. This is sort of the new thing for some of my bigger schools. It's probably not new. We are mostly engaged right now in helping our students develop skills for industry, for teaching, for government. Our hashtag is teaching the art of science. And so everything that we do is sort of based around that. Last year, we had some of our students do internships within our community. San Antonio has a really vibrant bioscience industry. So we had some of our students do that. We have some students who are interested in entrepreneurship, and they went and did some things with a group called Health Cell. So it's, for us, it's a growing piece of our graduate program, but there are multiple opportunities and growing. We have a career fair, I believe is what it's called. I could be wrong. At the end of this month, where we're bringing in, we're having workshops for students and sort of what you're doing here, but for grad students. So there are a few things that we're working on right now. It's still in its infancy, but we see this taking off because we recognize that many of our graduate students have no intention of staying in academia. And it's a reality check for us to make sure that we are preparing our students to do exactly what they want to do.
And then Dr. Bennett?
Sure. For those students who do want to go into academia, the Sheridan Center for Teaching and Learning at Brown has 5 levels of certificates that you can take. The newest one we just added, called Certificate 5, which is in research mentoring. And it allows Ph.D. students to receive lectures from various faculty across campus who are really good at what they do and helping to develop sort of research projects and so forth and working with trainees. Graduate students who participate in this particular program are paired with an undergraduate student, and they receive funding to work on a project throughout the year that helps to develop the students' learning as well as the graduate students' ability to be a research mentor. Throughout the year, we also have career panels where we bring in alumni who have either gone into academic careers or outside of academia. And then there are 2 very unique programs I'll mention very quickly. One is called Open Graduate Education. We started this a few years ago with funding from the Mellon Foundation, initially to help Ph.D. students in humanities and social sciences to pursue secondary master's degrees in a field outside of their Ph.D. area. And the idea is that this would give students sort of, more exposure and training and make them more marketable when they enter the job market, whether they pursue a career in academia or not. So this program is offered to Ph.D. students in the biomedical sciences as well. And the second sort of unique thing that is uniquely Brown, as we like to say, is the BEST program, the Brown Executive Scholars Training Program, which I direct, which is a 12-week program in the spring where doctoral candidates and advanced master students can participate in a structured mentoring relationship with a higher ed administrator, one of our senior deans or directors or presidential level folks, to sort of explore what that career path is like and to talk about what the grad student wants to do if they want to pursue academic administration. There's a seminar series every week where deans of the college, grad school, School of Public Health, and so forth speak, and also students often engage in many practicum projects throughout the semester with their sponsors. So this helps students explore jobs in academic administration if you know you want to be a dean one day or a center director like those of us who are here on the panel. So those are some things that we do that have worked out really well over the past several years for our students to help prepare them for the job market.
And Dr. O'Riordan, do you have any programs that you'd like to share about your campus?
Yeah, and I want to emphasize it is a really important question for all of you to ask when you go on interviews. We are a really large university, and so we have, this kind of career training and development at many levels. So at the Rackham Graduate School, which essentially covers all graduate programs, not just biomedical sciences, they have many types of career workshops of the sort that were discussed. That focus on industry. And the thing that's really cool about that is they offer the opportunity for any student that's interested in any particular career, like science writing, to come work with them to help organize these things. So it's not just a way to learn, but also a way to sort of network and get more information. The programs, like my program, but any of the PhD programs also do sort of program-specific events. We, for example, organized a networking event where people could meet our former alumni and really kind of join our LinkedIn website that really allows them to link to a lot of different different expertises and different companies. And then the other thing which has really been helpful is that we have a really, really terrific School of Engineering, School of Public Health, and so we've actually started to expand our professional development in conjunction with these partners. So for example, in conjunction with the College of Engineering, there's a very extensive entrepreneurship program where you can take some classes on the business of starting a company, where you can actually work together with students in the business school and engineering to learn practically how to start a company. There are mechanisms to do innovation, to really understand what that means, how to innovate in medicine and science. And so there are also certificate programs for getting more expertise in teaching. So we have a lot of really extensive programs throughout the university. But I think maybe the most important thing that you're probably hearing from a lot of us up here is that we are trying to enable students to go out and look on their own with some infrastructure, you know, to learn, to set up their own panels, to follow their own interests, because the environment out there is changing. And so we always want to enable that process.
And Dr. Jones and Dr. Vishwanatha, do you guys want to add anything?
So not to steal any thunder from the Brown program called BEST, NIH actually started a new program called the Broadening Experiences Science Training. It's also called the BEST program. So for those of you who are interested in looking at alternative careers, you know, the data is that only 42% of PhDs end up in academic environment. The other 58 go to other types of career opportunities. So NIH wanted to challenge some institutions to come up with some novel ways of training PhDs, giving them opportunities to go into all these career opportunities. So if you go to the National Institute of Health website and look for diversity, just put in diversity, and then you get a site where all of these institutions that are now doing some novel things, they're all listed and their best practices are listed. Maybe you should consider one of those institutions if you are looking for PhD to do different things. So the idea is to incorporate some internship during your PhD, depending upon your interest, whether you want to go to a research R&D or you want to go to a teaching position or something else. So, but definitely there is a national interest in doing this, and many institutions, just like our colleagues here are talking, we are all thinking about how do we change our PhD training to make sure that you have opportunities to pursue your career goals.
Okay, and our next question is, other than experiences in research, what other experiences can make a student applying to graduate school stand out from other applicants outside of GPAs or volunteering? And Dr. Lee, would you like to start with this question?
So at Northwestern and here at UC Davis, one of the things, I was involved in diversity programs, and so we do like to see students who have been involved in other programs that help underrepresented students. And so you don't have to be, you know, a minority or a woman yourself, but students who have been really interested in diversity programming, so that if they went to serve as a tutor at the local high school or junior high or whatever, things like that, or did on little science shows at your local museum or something like that. That helps us to see that you're interested in communicating and interacting with other people, so that you've got a broad range of interactions, so that you're simply just stuck in the lab and not only a lab rat, but that you do have strong communication and social skills and things like that. And something which I'll mention also briefly is that I have to admit that sometimes there is a sort of stigma associated with those students who get 4.0 GPAs. Not that you should purposely, get, a B or a lower grade, but we do sort of worry about those students who have an absolute perfect 4.0. We do wonder if there's some perfectionism, if the students really struggle with dealing with failures and problems in the research. So that occasionally does happen. So just be aware of that. And so think about that in terms of what you put your emphasis in terms of coursework versus research and other activities. So something to think about. So.
And then starting from Dr. Blake, would you guys like to add any other suggestions on what kind of other characteristics would make an applicant stand out?
So we have no issues with 4.0 GPAs, so no issues at all. I think I'm going to tell you what I do, and I'm going to bet that the folks on my left and my right will nod in agreement. We essentially look for 5 things because we use a holistic approach to admissions. So we look at your GPA, and let me just be clear about what that means. You do not have to have a perfect GPA. What we're looking for is strength in the sciences, and we're looking for some degree of rigor, and we're also looking for some degree of persistence. So as young people, you come away to school, you could, in your freshman year, lose your mind and thought that you were here on a partying degree, and we're forgiven. So if at some point shortly after your freshman year, you have what I like to refer to as a come to Jesus moment, and you straighten up thereafter, and we see that your grades have taken an upshot after that, you're not gonna get killed for a lower GPA. So we do look at your GPA, but we take it in the context of everything else. We look at your GREs, but we take that in the context of everything else. We look, at least we do, very specifically at your letters of recommendations. Those are probably the money ball in admissions for us, okay? Because science is a very small group of people, very unique, and if I'm a neuroscientist and you tell me that you work in a neuroscientist lab, I'm probably going to know who that is, and I'll pick up the phone and call that person, right? So you want to know, you want your letters of recommendations to come from people who you've done research with and who can speak to your research prowess and the type of hands you have in the lab. So that's the third one. The fourth one is we look at your fit for my school. For example, if you're a chemistry major and you want to do pure chemistry, you probably don't want to be at my school. And I will just take you out of your misery right there. I would say we're not a good fit for you. So we look for students who are a good fit in terms of your research. Does your research interest align with the type of things that we are known and we do really well, okay? And then the fifth thing that we look for is if you make it past those four and you actually get an interview, then we look at how you perform within the interview context.
And would any other panelists like to add to that?
I'll just add to the idea about what type of experiences sort of matter or could help in the process outside of the things we talked about. Work experience is fine, whether it's sort of research related or education related. And I also want to say that it's okay for you to take that gap year or two if that's what you want or need to do. Whether you're in a post-bac program or, again, you're working, getting professional experience in the area that you sort of went to undergrad for, it's perfectly fine. You're not penalized for that. We just want to know that when you do apply to our program and if you are admitted that you're ready. You're ready to sort of take on the work, to be engaged in the sort of the material and ready to, sort of work really hard and make the contribution that we hope you will, not just to the program and the research, but to the broader field.
So speaking of gap years, are there any pros or cons of taking a gap year before going to graduate school? And we could start with Dr. Jones.
No, I think there's really, and it's important and it's reflected in the application. Gap years, when conveyed honestly and truthfully in the application, says more about the individual's persistence and true decision to pursue any career. And a lot of times when you see that across in the application compared to some of our stellar applicants, we feel in our gut that that's the individual who may be ready to prepare to handle the ups and downs of a biomedical career, a Ph.D. degree, a lab rat experience for 4.5, 5 years. And so gaps are very important to each individual as long as they convey in their application sincerely why that gap was taken and how that gap and whatever they were doing was preparing them for their ultimate goal. So it's very important. And I see it as not a hindrance to anything in terms of the application process.
Would anybody else like to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add just that not only do I agree with that, but I would have to say that if you mean by a gap year some time taken off after your degree to actually do research, That is a huge help, not only to us, but to you, because I think maybe the message you're hearing from all of us is graduate school is a huge commitment, and it's hard. It's fantastically interesting, but it's hard. It's a lot of work. And, you know, if you've had just a really part-time experience during your undergraduate work, you know, depending on the lab you're in, you may not always get a feeling for what that commitment is like. Some labs will give you that, some labs might not. A 3-month summer experience may or may not give you that. And so I think there is some advantage to sort of taking a year and working, you know, full-time at research to see if it's something that you really enjoy, if you're excited to come into lab day after day after day after day, when that is your whole life. And if after the end of that year, you're still really excited to go to graduate school, we see that in your application. And I think that that's something which can be very valuable, you know, on both sides.
And before people apply to graduate school, sometimes people often apply to post-bac programs. And so the question is, how does the completion of the post-bac program influence the application if one has a low GPA or a weak graduate school application? And starting with Dr. Lee.
Yeah, so I think as many of the other panelists have mentioned about the importance of having good research experience, having really good research experience can offset a sort of moderate or weak GPA. And maybe I'll have a little bit of confession. So when I was an undergrad, my GPA at the end of my undergrad was a 3.2. So sort of maybe on the bottom or lower end of that, but I actually had significant research experience. So I had worked at 3 different chemical companies. My PhD was in chemistry. And I had done 2 different research experiences with faculty at my undergrad institution, and I got a publication out of that. I think the institution, I went to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign for grad school. I think they really were interested in the research experiences that I had done. My GPA was sort of okay, but I also had taken a couple of graduate level courses as an undergrad. I think that helped quite a bit in terms of the admissions committee taking a look at me and so forth. So I think that type of research experience could be really valuable, and I really offset a weak GPA. And so when I was at Northwestern, we would really see students who had maybe sort of around a 3.0 GPA, but if we saw some potential, like if we saw that they had significant grades in their science courses, that was really helpful. And if maybe they got the lower grades in like humanities and social sciences, it was like, oh, that's okay. And we're scientists, we don't really care too much about that. But if they had significant research experience, did a post-bac, did a prep program or something like that, that really did offset a sort of moderate or weak GPA. So.
Does anybody, oh, sorry, Dr. Blake.
I think one has to be a little careful in choosing a post-bac program. The post-bac program is really designed to help address a weakness that the student has. So if you go to a post-bac program, if you didn't have a lot of research and you go to a post-bac program that gives you a lot of research, then that's good. But if your 4 years of research didn't get into grad school and grades is your issue, but then going into a post-bac program that doesn't have a grade component to it does you no good. Okay, so the point I'm making is post-bac programs are great, but you will have to do your homework to make sure that the post-bac program that you're attending addresses your specific deficiencies, not anybody else's, your specific deficiencies. That said, love students that come from post-bac programs. We have a bunch of them in our program right now, and usually those are really the ones, because they go off and generally have a lot more research experience, those are the ones that come in and are absolutely passionate about what they're doing.
And I'll just add on that, a great resource to find out sort of what post-bac programs do exist around the country, which will take you to individual websites to find out what the focus of that program is, can be found on the AAMC website, the Association of American Medical Colleges. They have a list of post-baccalaureate programs across the country that you can search by state or by institution. So I would encourage you to check that out so that you can determine which type of program, whether it be a record enhancer or a career changer, as they're often referred to in broad categories, which might be the best for you.
Dr. O'Riordan, do you want to share any thoughts? Or?
I don't have anything to add. They're terrific.
Anybody else? Okay. So our next question is, what are some common trends you see in successful applicants? And we can just go down the line, starting from Dr. O'Riordan.
So I sort of feel a little bit like a parrot here. So I think, you know, a really good research experience that's evidenced by great letters of recommendation, as was referred to earlier, is really important. But I guess what I also find compelling in an application is that not only does the letter of recommendation say you've had a really great research experience, but actually the research statement and then followed up by an interview, the student can really show that they've had enough initiative and been interested enough to really to delve into it beyond what would just be expected of someone that just showed up, you know, to get some hours. And so I think that's what we're looking for, because, you know, at the essence, you really have to love it for what it is, which is, you know, hard, messy, interesting questions. And I think that if you are interested enough to dive deeply into it, that's a really great sign for us.
Okay. And how do you view non-traditional applicants, such as those who graduated with a degree not related to the field that they studied in, that they applied for? And starting with Dr. Jones.
That's a tough one. Non-traditional applicants, really, wow. You see that they're lacking a lot of the science courses that we want to see, and yet some of them come in their personal statement in particular, generate such a passion about why and decision why they came from, let's say, psychology and want to enter cancer immunology, and they draw a beautiful picture in a paragraph, and you can't but say, you know what, I want to give this applicant an interview because I want to learn more. And truthfully, that also comes from the letters of recommendation as well. We see them come from the liberal arts instructor, but also somewhere they've touched base with biomedical sciences or the research interest. Somewhere they have a hint of an experience that turned them into that direction. And so, yeah, it's difficult, because then you have all the other applicants who from day one did all the steps necessary to look like a biomedical doctorate applicant. And so, yeah, that's trouble. But we don't discourage it at all. It just makes the process interesting, and for me and for our review committee when we review the applicants. It's fun.
And Dr. Vishwanatha, would you like to share anything?
Yeah, actually, you know, I have a lot of experience with non-traditional applicants, not for PhD, but let me talk about one who, for the medical school. This person was a Christian minister, 58 years old, wanted to get into medical school. Okay, but just like Dr. Jones said, you look at the personal statement, you can see the passion and the motivation for this person. That person got in, successfully completed medical school in 4 years. So you can do it. I think the biggest challenge, like Dr. Jones mentioned, is the fact that you are not keeping up with the science courses. So my advice always has been that for a non-traditional student, before jumping into graduate school, perhaps consider taking a semester of a senior undergraduate course at a school, just to get yourself geared up to the handling the curriculum load and whatever recent advances in science. Because when you go to the graduate school in the first semester, you're here in the classroom with all these other students who have just completed their coursework and they're all up to date, and you will have a challenge. But people have done it, and I think a lot of admissions committees actually look favorably at non-traditional students because of the maturity level and the motivation. And so.
Dr. Lee, would you like to share anything?
We do occasionally see some non-traditional students in the sense of perhaps they were working like full-time when they were an undergrad, and so perhaps their undergrad years took them a little bit longer than 4 years, which can be perfectly fine. And so in some ways that could actually be a strength, so that if we see that, you know, they're able to juggle coursework, working at a job, and maybe doing research also, or volunteering and things like that, it really shows that you've got initiative, that you're able to juggle multiple things at the same time. And that's what you need to do in grad school, obviously, right? You may probably be TAing, you'll probably be doing research, doing your own coursework, maybe some other activities outside of that. And so it really shows that you can juggle multiple things, you can manage your time, you can think about priorities and so forth. So in terms of non-traditional students, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that you have to obviously show that you were able to manage these sort of maybe non-traditional aspects or issues of your experiences. So.
Dr. Blake, what are your school's thoughts on non-traditional applicants?
This is an interesting question. I'm going to say two things. Research is the best predictor of success in graduate school. If you don't have research, you're probably not coming to Texas. Non-traditional will get in to the degree that you're still somewhere in the realm of science. Let me explain to you what I mean. We have a neuroscience graduate program that is probably not known for the psychology side of it. We're known for behavioral neuroscience, stuff like that, right? So if I have a student with a psychology degree, but who has done the requisite courses, then we would probably look at that person. But if I have a psychologist student who has done all psychology and no basic science, I spend about $200,000 to train a Ph.D. student. I am not taking that kind of a risk for someone who does not have a basic science background to come into a basic science biomedical program. So non-traditional has its limits. If I have a chemistry student who wants to come into my biochemistry program, absolutely. If you think of that as non-traditional, yes. But you know, a 58-year-old minister, probably not in my program.
And Dr. Bennett?
Non-traditional students are fine as long as they have the proper preparation to succeed in the program they've applied to. So, and again, non-traditional could mean that your undergraduate major doesn't directly align with the program you've applied to, or you know, you may be slightly older than the other students, or there could be other things that we wouldn't sort of discriminate against. But you would need to have taken the courses, you know, maybe done a post-bac program, worked as a research assistant, and done all the things that would sort of put you on the same level or on par with those students who might just be finishing college at 22, but who have done the courses, who've done the research and things like that. So just come with the proper preparation. Passion's good, and the passion would come out in the personal statement, but we'd need more than that.
And Dr. O'Riordan, do you?
I think we treat non-traditional students in the same way that my colleagues described.
Okay. So currently, some graduate schools offer online graduate degrees where graduate students can complete courses online. What are your views on taking an online graduate course versus a live graduate course? Would you view both degrees as equivalent? And starting with Dr. Jones.
Well, I think as long as you can compare and engage in the academic rigor, and I guess that can be defined online by the coursework, the course load, it should be okay. The problem we may see is that when we talk about online and what next steps, and you know, maybe it's at a master's level, but definitely in biomedical science at the doctoral level, we're talking about research. We're talking about face-to-face interactions. And so that becomes very difficult to envision that a truly online or 90% online can be achieved at the same time of earning a doctorate degree in biomedical sciences in any of the disciplines. So that's my take on it. In terms of our institution, we're very young in terms of taking that step in terms of online curriculum in that area. Dr. Vishwanatha, do you know?
Would anybody else like to share their thoughts on this? Or? Okay. And so we are now nearing the last few minutes of our panel, graduate admissions panel. And so would each panelist like to offer any last tips or advice for attendees who are planning to apply to graduate school in the near future? So starting with Dr. Riordan.
So I think you've heard a lot over and over again from us about research, but the one thing maybe we haven't talked about that I find is not very well developed in many applicants is really great writing skills. And these are worth developing because they'll help you no matter what area of science or any other profession that you'll go into. So I really encourage you to really strengthen those skills always.
I have to agree with that 100%. You will be required to write in different ways throughout the courses that you take and the research that you do, the manuscripts you prepare for publication, and also the dissertation that you'll need to produce as well to graduate. But one thing I'll say about one particular component of the application, we talked about the letters of recommendation. I would encourage you to be very, very thoughtful about who you ask to write these letters. I would encourage you to consider asking each of these people face to face, if possible, can they write you a strong letter? I think you need to sort of, notice the body language. You need to notice everything when you ask them, because you do need a strong letter from everyone. If you don't get that commitment, I would encourage you to maybe say thank you and ask someone else. You will be required to submit up to at least 3 letters of recommendation, but you can submit others. But again, you need strong letters. And those letters shouldn't just say that you did well in the class, but they should sort of talk about your attributes as a person and why this particular recommender thinks that you have the great potential to be a wonderful Ph.D. student and scientist, and that you can add something to the field. So it needs to be someone who can really say something about you, who knows you. So again, don't underestimate the power of those letters and what people say about you.
The message: be passionate. You've got to convey that to an admissions committee. Be strategic. As you go through your applications, you're probably not going to be applying to one school. Take notes. Treat it like a course. 2 people before me talked about writing. Writing shows up in your application. Show it to other people so they can read it and correct it. Do not try to do it on your own. Be strategic. And then the third thing I would like to leave you with is ignore deadlines. Let me tell you what that means. That sounds weird, right? Let me tell you what that means. Do not wait until the deadline to submit your application. You will get the least amount of attention if you wait until the deadline, because there are thousands of other jokers who are doing the same thing. Okay? Be passionate, be strategic, ignore the deadlines.
This is all really wonderful advice, and so I would heartily agree with all of that. One thing which I'll just thought about recently, which I'll add, is that we talked about the importance of research experience, which is really important. But one thing which I do notice occasionally in some applicants is that they're a really good pair of hands. They know how to do lab work, and they're a really good lab technician or a really good lab manager, but that's about it. They're not really suited for grad school. So occasionally you get some students who really enjoy working in the lab. They love working with their hands. They're really good in terms of technical skills and so forth. But if you ask them about their understanding of the science and the research about why they're doing things, or them taking initiative, it really shows that that's actually a weakness then. So they could be a really good lab technician, but they're not really suited for grad school because they haven't really understood what the questioning that's really involved in terms of research, and being able to find answers to those solutions, finding answers to those questions. And so I do occasionally see some applicants who are really good lab technicians, but they're not really suited for grad school. So think about that as you think about future steps. Maybe you're a really good person in a lab, and that's wonderful. And that you can find a really wonderful career in doing that, and there's lots of people who do that. But think about, really, are you really good suited for grad school? Are you able to ask questions? Are you able to find ways of working around problems and so forth? And so think about that too, on top of all the other stuff.
So just one point I want to add to all the wonderful suggestions you got. One is PhD graduate school is the only time where you can explore different areas. It's really, you're just forming your ideas, unless you have already made up your mind and this is exactly what I'm going to be working on. This is a great time for you to find out, especially most schools give you 2 to 3 different rotations. You can go into different faculty labs and try to find out what they're working on. This is an opportunity for you to look at various fields and then make a decision, this is really what my passion is, this is what I want to do. So do that, because graduate studies is the only time where you can explore. Once you go into either postdoc or industry, your career is set. From then on, you're pretty much in the same field that you'll be working on. So I tell all my graduate students, enjoy the graduate school, try to learn as much as you can from various fields and all, and so explore. That's the only suggestion I can give you.
So my last comment would be, you probably know what schools, or you should be thinking about 5, 10 schools that you want to consider spending a lot of time, and that includes the city, the state at large, to get a sense of the environment, because you will be living as a person amongst others in a same community trying to achieve your goal. So you should have an idea, and like you mentioned, you don't wait till the last minute to apply. And so with that in mind, how do you be competitive with all the others who are thinking of going to that institution? Get to know the institution and let the institution know you. It's nothing like I enjoy getting a phone call, getting an email from an applicant saying, hey, I'm interested in the Health Science Center in Fort Worth. I'm interested in microbiology. I heard about Dr. such and such. How can I get in touch with that person? And I'm instantly going down the hall. Dr. such and such, this is a student interested. And then he'll get the email, or she'll get the email to say, hey, can I come by and visit your lab? A big plus, right? Because now you don't only have the committee on your side, you've got someone outside of the committee at your institution involved. And we now know that you're interested in that area, that faculty, and that health science center or that institution. There's opportunities. A lot of colleges now and universities offer open houses, tours, if you will. We offer tours. If you're in the area, drop in, set up an appointment. If you think that's the institution you want to be in, and so you're increasing your competitiveness among a very a strong niche of whether we are going to take this applicant versus the other. And it's nothing like putting a face to the name, I believe. And if it's your profession and your career, you're willing to take that risk and do that, it goes far. So that's one of the perks there. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished panelists. And this concludes the end of our graduate admissions panel. Let's please give a warm round of applause for our panelists.